Welcome, welcome, welcome. We know your time is important. You don't have much time, and we appreciate you joining us. With us today, part of our continuing series where we interview activists, reporters, writers, columnists, academics, anybody on the left, anybody on the right, anybody who can think coherently. And we want to package those interviews and bring them directly to you, the public, so that you could do this thing that was popular when I was back in high school called thinking for yourself. Maybe come back, maybe it won't. With us today is Professor Donald T. Critchlow, Professor of American Political History at Arizona State University. He's the Katzen Family Professor, teaches courses on American political history, political conspiracy, and contemporary American history. He was awarded the Zebulon Pierce Distinguished Teaching Award in Humanities in 2021. He serves as the co-director of the undergraduate certificate program in political history and leadership in the School of Historical, Philosophical, and Religious Studies. He's also a founding editor of the Journal of Policy History, a quarterly academic journal published by Cambridge University Press, very distinguished. He's published in 2021, Revolutionary Monsters, Five Men Who Turned Liberation into Monsters, In Defense of Populism, Republican Character from Nixon to Reagan, American Political History, When Hollywood Was Right, The Conservative Ascendancy, How the GOP Made Political History in 2007, Phyllis Schlafly and Grassroots Conservatism, Studebaker, The Life and Death of American Corporations. After receiving his doctorate degree in history from the University of California, Berkeley, Critchlow became a professor at the University of Notre Dame and later a chair of the history department at St. Louis University. He's been a visiting professor at Hong Kong University and Warsaw University. He has lectured extensively in the United States, Europe, and China. He's the founding editor of the Journal of Policy History. His books are regularly reviewed in the New York Times Book Review, New Republic, National Review, The Nation, The New Yorker, Washington Post Book Review, and other magazines and newspapers. He's also appeared on C-SPAN, NPR's Talk of the Nation, BBC World News, and others numerous talk radio programs. He has written for the Washington Post, New York Observer, New York Post, National Review, and Claremont Review of Books. And we will be talking to him about this book. But before we get to that, let's see how we did. Professor, did I get anything wrong? Do we need to state something differently? Was there any mistakes with your bio?
Oh, there weren't any mistakes, but I also want to thank you very much for inviting me. I do have a new update. I'm director of the Center for American Institutions, which was established in last fall, and it's privately funded, even though we're at Arizona State University. And our purpose is to restore and renew confidence in our American institutions. So we have an extraordinary program that we've undertaken. So we've raised close to $1.2 million that funds our organization and activities. But we needn't go into that right now. Let's address the problems that America faces currently.
Right. This book was my introduction to learning about you, grassroots activism, presenting a cacophony of voices calling a reform of various sorts without programmatic coherence is often derided as populist and distrusted by both political parties and voters. Could you tell us about the book? And maybe while you're doing that, or maybe before, I understand you have extensive history looking at political science and going back. If you could first address this question, and if you could answer it as if I've been in a cave for the last 7 years, I don't know what's going on, and I 10th grade education. Is political polarization a problem in America today? And given that you've been studying political issues for decades, how did we get here?
Yeah, the book argues that populism, that is insurgent movements outside the established political parties, is necessary for democratic reform. It renews our institutions. So at certain points in our history, they've been inflected points. What we find is that the people become discontent, or large numbers of people become discontent with the political system, feeling that the two major parties, or the major political parties, are failing in addressing often economic problems or social problems. And And so what happens is you get the insurgent movements that become social movements that often are translated into third parties, and if these movements are powerful enough, often depending on leadership, they challenge the two political parties. So there are periods of disequilibrium, radical protest, often with sometimes with violence, but quite threatening to the established order. And in response, often the political parties have to respond by incorporating the programs of populist programs, often modified. And within the established political parties, you have younger leaders that will step forward, that will articulate the populist demands. So I think we're in such a period today in a disequilibrium, in a period of disequilibrium. Now, we haven't seen the emergence of third parties, but what we saw with Donald Trump in 2016, even though he was representing, he was within an established party, captured the Republican Party, captured this discontent and then indeed anger. And I think we're still in this period, and indeed, I think it's grown worse as we've seen polarization intensify and emotions become high. Yet, one last point I want to make is that I think generally the American public and the electorate, and you can see this in surveys, are really want return to more normality, and they want major issues being addressed in this country: economic issues, social issues, problems with the border, and so forth. So right now, the political parties appear incapable of addressing these issues, and we've seen violence, riots in our cities, and I expect to see further disequilibrium until we get through this period. When that's going to occur, I can't predict. I'm just a historian. I have a hard enough time predicting the past without trying to predict the future.
If I may, I think what you're saying is periodically countries, nations, America, go through populist eras. I think it was Huey Long in the 1930s. And we're just going through another populist era right now. And that's why there's all this calamity. And we don't know how long it's going to last. But populist eras are a little chaotic.
Yeah, thank you. You put it in a more simplified form, which you asked me to do. But
is that roughly correct, though? I don't want to misinterpret.
Another point that I think is very important for your audience, and it's a warning, that although I'm arguing that populist movements are important for renewal of democracy, and I've argued that we've seen this kind of reconciliation, absorption of populist demands into the main political party system, that doesn't mean that it's going to occur in the future. Just because we've solved problems in the past doesn't mean that we're going to solve problems in the future. So we may be entering a period of complete political disruption without either party being able to absorb these populist demands, whatever they are, and inability for new leadership to emerge within these parties. Right now, Donald Trump, who lost in 2020, looks like the leading figure within the Republican Party to carry forward this, expression of populist demands. But he's carrying a lot of baggage with him. We know that. I'm not presenting a negative portrait of Trump, and I'm not expressing a never Trumper view. But what I am saying is that there's a lot of baggage that he's carrying with him. And I think we're entering into a 2024 election cycle in which the majority of Americans are not happy with either candidate. And so I think it's a quite stressful period we've entered into.
I have to ask. I've interviewed a variety of people,
Mm-hmm.
and every professor who says, "Oh, it's bad now," always says, like maybe one or two didn't, but almost 98% of them always go, "Yeah, but we had bad times in the past and we got through." So I mean, literally 20, 30 professors have done that. You're the first professor, academic researcher in political polarization who said the opposite. You're the first one to say, just because we survived in the past doesn't mean we're definitely going to make it in the future. Everybody else seems to have this idea that, we survived in the past, so we can survive anything in the future. And I always thought, how do you know that? Because they would go, well, we survived the Civil War, and there was a rough economic period in 1890, and there was the riots against German immigrants in the 1930s. And I go, well, let's just pick one of those episodes. Let's take the riots against German immigrants as a reaction to World War I. Okay, we got through that, right? But people were dragged out into the street and killed. And if we take the population of America in 1930 and then magnify it to our population level now, and you add in live TV cameras and people with smartphones on the scene like George Floyd, are we ready, I said, for 5,000 people to be drug out of their homes, murdered by fellow Americans, blood dripping in the streets, televise the whole thing, and then we're just going to go, oh, that's cool. Moving on.
Yeah.
We lost our game. We lost our minds when 3,000 people died on 9/11. And I see professors go, we could survive tough times. And I go, if you scale up these past events to now, we're talking about thousands of people dead in the streets, live on television. You think Americans are just going to get over that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And at the center of your point is really a cliche that history repeats itself. In this case, the repetition is, yes, we've seen really bad things happen, Civil War, 9/11. We have a history of urban riots, but everything works itself out in the future. History will repeat itself. And I don't think history repeats itself. I say that even as a historian, because each period is unique. And whether it's a nation or even as an individual, as you move to a new situation, this situation is unique to itself. So we may be entering into a period of chaos. Now that chaos may be one of that you've described, one of great violence and climatic in that sense, but it also could be one of just kind of gradual decline with periodic outbreaks of violence. We've seen that happen with empires in the past. So empires do rise and fall, and just because we've gotten out of experienced tragedy and turmoil in the past doesn't mean that we're not in a unique period now and everything's going to end up hunky-dory. That's why I think we need to be really concerned and really active, both intellectually and politically and as citizens right now in this country, because I think there's a lot at stake for our nation.
It reminds me of the phrase, the empire will disappear not with a bang, but with a whimper.
Yeah, T.S. Eliot, a play on T.S. Eliot.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
And that, it also reminds me when you look at like empires collapsing and you look at Rome, one of the things that a lot of historians say is, well, when exactly did Rome collapse? Because basically what they're saying is Rome collapsed and then it kind of sort of hung on, limping around for decades until one German warlord basically walked up and said, it's over, guy, go home. So technically you could go, oh no, it lasted another century. Not really. It was basically a shadow of itself. If you look at the Turkish Empire, I think the last century, a couple decades in Europe, they were called the sick man of Europe. So
Right.
there's this period where, the Spanish Empire. Before America knocked it out in the 1800s, it was basically barely holding on to its colonies. It could barely enforce anything for like 50, 60 years. So there is a period of these empires, and they don't just collapse. They kind of go into a malaise, and they can't really do anything or fix anything or solve any problems, but there's never the finishing blow to knock them out. Could we possibly be going into an American period where we go into this kind of malaise and just lasts 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years? Can't really fix anything. There's no real knockout blow. China doesn't invade us. China doesn't buy up all our corporations. We just kind of, but it never gets better. It never gets fixed. And it reminds me also the Italian period, Plato Plomo, blood or lead. I'm sorry, lead or silver. And that was like 20 years long. Same thing with the troubles in Ireland. So I've asked Americans, what if we don't get out of it? What if it lasts 1 or 2 decades and just kind of a slow, another January 6th, couple more years, another January 6th, couple more years, another January 6th, and we just can't seem to fix it for decades on end? Could that be a possibility?
I think there are 2 points that should be raised. First of all, is that empires fall when the leadership of the regime begin to lose confidence in themselves and what the founding principles of the nation are. And they begin to see themselves and understand, at least if not intellectually, within kind of their guts, that they're really empowered just for greed and power. And one of the things that I think we're experiencing today is at least a common belief that the leaders of the nation today, both financial and media and politically Hollywood, it's just all about money and greed and to maintain power. And there's not a kind of confidence in their own leadership, really. They're just maintaining. So that's when you get the collapse of regimes. The regimes empires can collapse gradually. Rome didn't fall overnight. It had extraordinary wealth, and I think America has extraordinary wealth that will sustain us for quite a while. We're not headed on a downward path. We're exceptionally strong nation. We have we're at the forefront of technology and pharmaceuticals technology. We do have a serious collapse of our educational system, both on the lower grades through high school all the way up through colleges. But we still have great science and people, engineers, and so forth. So I think we have a lot of strength, a lot of wealth, and so it's not inevitable that we're going to collapse. But what we do need is new leaders to step forward, and that's a call for the younger generation, which actually seems it's having its own disarray, both in terms of kind of knowledge, basic understanding of foundational principles, and their own orientation in the world. So that's not a good sign, but it's not all lost. So if I may add one more thing, we have at the Center for American Institutions, we have a very active high school leadership program. We have a very active student programs, but we also have formed 2 national commissions, and we have a national commission report coming out on the teaching of American history in our colleges. It's going to be released November 2nd. It's being the chair of it is former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker with Newt Gingrich.
Oh, wow.
And the Honorable Mary Follen. It's a powerful report we'll have a press conference in Washington, D.C.
When is that?
It's the November 2nd, the National Commission report. Are you there?
Yes.
You started to ask a question.
I was just wondering so that November 2nd, the National Christian Report, you were naming some big names. You're going to get Scott Walker and Newt Gingrich to talk about something. That's definitely what I was getting at about how did we get here about political polarization. Some people say Newt Gingrich started us off in 92, and other people say that Scott Walker in 2015 was a precursor for what Trump did in 2016.
Now, this issue of political polarization, they argue that 94 with the Gingrich revolution was kind of the beginning. Actually, this is a very involved, pretty complex question. My own view is that generally politicians reflect what's going on within their constituency. There was already polarization occurring, and Gingrich captured that when he took control of the House. So, I don't think a lot of times politicians are reading polls. Most of them don't have long-term strategies. They basically have strategies to win the next election, whether it's in a 2-year, 4-year, or 8-year cycle. But the polarization was already there. What the problem is now is that we don't have leaders that are beginning to really address serious issues that are needed for reform. We have problems with income inequality. We have urban decay. We have a problem at our border, and we're confronting serious threats from nuclear powers, from China, North Korea, and Iran. I mean, we should be able to agree on these things. But, we have a border crisis. I'm here in Arizona that we know there's drugs coming across the border. We know there's sex trafficking going on. And yet yet we have political leaders who don't want to address these issues. We know we have urban problems, so we have a problem with homelessness. We have a drug problem. I mean, while we admit that we have these problems and begin to address these problems, in an incremental way, in a serious way, and but that's a call for leadership, which I don't think we have at this point, generally.
I want to get to that. I do remember the border issue in Arizona. I remember famously the Minutemen and Janet Napolitano, I think, her name, and how she tolerated them after they executed people coming across the border. But I wanted to read you a passage from this book. It's called Collapse by Jared Diamond. Jared Diamond's a famous sociologist or researcher on collapse. Just a short paragraph. Individuals who find themselves members of a large coherent group or crowd, especially one that is emotionally excited, may become swept along to support the group's decision, even though the same individuals might have rejected the decision if allowed to reflect on it alone or at leisure. He was talking about how some societies collapse because they simply can't solve problems. They can't further irrational motives for failure to address problems. Also include the public may widely dislike those who first perceive and complain about the problem. So I've noticed when I talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene and her call for a national divorce because red and blue are so having difficulty getting along, people don't really want to talk about it because I said her name. And yet the issue's real. And then I'm listening to you talking about how we have a lack of leadership. I'm wondering if we have a lack of leadership or if the leaders are scared to do what they know is right for fear of arguing with their own party.
Right. Well, and also their own electorate, their own voters and constituents. So, in this kind of disequilibrium which we're experiencing, you get emotional rhetoric. And so if you even suggest, that the other side, whatever it's Republicans or Democrats, have some point, then you're going to be attacked by your own party.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I think that the problem right now, and this I think is very serious, is that in general, the public, we actually don't agree on much. We don't have kind of a sense of shared, unified core values. And that's apparent that is apparent in surveys, and it's apparent in our politics. I mean, we can't even agree that there's a problem with sex trafficking. The movie that just came out, The Sound of Freedom. Yeah, I mean, it's being attacked as some QAnon, conspiracy movie. It's not. I'm not trying to promote the movie. I'm not investing in it. But I mean, that sex trafficking isn't a global problem. That's something that we should confront. So we don't have an agreement on what our core values are. We don't have a core agreement on religious values, and we don't even have an agreement on what sexual identity is. I mean, so, and then we expect our politicians to try to address these. We need to kind of address them as a public ourselves, and that begins with the dialogue and a discussion. So it's easy to blame the politicians. It's easy to blame corporate America, the corporate executives, and so forth. I think they do deserve blame, but we should also blame ourselves.
I have a couple questions. You really great interview because you're saying things I haven't heard from others. I want to go back to this one real quick, and I have another question though. Newt Gingrich noticed the people were already polarized, and he responded to it. The typical story is Newt was a bad guy, and he came in. He decided, I want to win at all costs, and I'll just destroy the system. I think I'm hearing from you. The people were already polarized, and he was noticing that and speaking to it. Not that he made them polarized. He was taking cues from the public. They were polarized and responding to them. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I'm arguing. And within the Republican caucus, the Democrats, basically in the House in particular, had come to power following Watergate, the Watergate babies. And they were basically excluding the Democrats from party here. Even in the hearings, there was a lot of exclusion. The Republican leadership was going along with it, and Newt Gingrich basically organized the other House members who were tired of it. They saw what was happening in their own voters, and he rallied. He overthrew the established Republican leadership, and then he did so with the Contract for America, and that was an appeal for Republican new leadership to step forward and the old leadership to accept this new program. It actually wasn't a terribly radical program in itself.
I heard that. I'm not trying to be difficult, but could you give us an explanation? Why am I hearing from so many professors Newt Gingrich himself started polarization?
Yeah, well, I think there's serious political science debate. They're looking at data, but why people? A lot of times people looking at kind of data often don't look at the right data. And actually the data has been challenged, and it was clear that there was political polarization already occurring. And now, under Gingrich, it was going to intensify. Under Trump, Trump, for example, as I argue in the book, which is not a full-throated defense of populism, but Trump captured that. He captured the emotion that was out there. Now, in capturing it, he may have intensified it a bit, but it was already there. To think that Trump was, creating, somehow created this polarization, I think is kind of a misreading of how politics and social movements and social activism worked. I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, we saw the urban riots with Floyd. There was already massive discontent out there in the cities, and it took the Floyd killing to explode it. That's what happens when you get
That's a good point.
yeah.
That's a good point. You have right. African American people didn't see the videotape of George Floyd being murdered and say, "Oh my God, police are killing us." They already had that idea in mind, and then
That's
the video
right.
super reminded them of that, and that's why you had explosive. Right. So the ground was already seeded.
Right.
Ground was already seeded, and you put a
Right.
plant in there. Other question. Again, not trying to be difficult, trying to understand.
Yeah.
There are some professors like Morris Fiorina
Yeah.
who say there's no political polarization of the public. What are you talking about? I have these national surveys that show a majority of Americans want schools safe from guns. They believe a woman's right to choose. Maybe not like 100%, but like 65%. They believe in this. They believe in that. See, the people all agree. We want safe schools, and we want clean drinking water, and we want some gun regulation, and we want some access for women. So we're not polarized at all because I have political surveys of the public that show that.
Yeah, I have great respect for Morris Fiorina, who's a Stanford professor,
right?
Quite good at what he does. I just think he has a misunderstanding. I mean, his data has been challenged, by the way, by other data analysis. But I also think he has a kind of a fundamental misunderstanding of how politics works. And I want to suggest it comes from living in Palo Alto in California. But I just think that that's a misreading. I think the polarization is deep. That doesn't mean that we don't have certain agreements within the electorate. So everybody believes that schools should be safe. Right. But is there differences on what should be being taught in those schools? If Farina thinks that there's some kind of consensus over sex education and transgender in the schools, I think it's a serious misreading. And that's not being and those issues on school education is what brought Glenn Youngkin to power in Virginia.
Thank
and
you.
to think that Youngkin created the problems that discontent among the electorate over sex education is just doesn't make common sense. It's not commonsensical, is it? So you go through all the data and you end up somehow Newt Gingrich is causing polarization. You know, Trump caused it. Glenn Youngkin did. I mean, we've all seen Glenn Youngkin. We hope to get him here, by the way, to speak for the Center of American Institutions. We're working on that right now. But to think that he caused the polarization doesn't seem commonsensical. So you go through all the data with all of their regression analysis, and you're there going, well, what world am I living in?
And Glenn Youngkin, where did he win again? Was it
Virginia and governor?
Virginia, Youngkin. And he won on culture issues.
Yep. He won on, it was primarily on issues of education. There was a protest from parents, mothers in Virginia, and he captured that among other things. And he won an area, but he didn't create the discontent or mothers organizing and fights at school boards. It was already occurring. But my point is that there is polarization already within the public over what should be taught in the schools, and you could go through any number of issues in which, so you can pick issues out. Yeah, we believe in safe schools. Yeah, we believe that our cities should be safe for us and healthy. We all believe that the environment should be clean. Yeah, we agree that we're a nation of immigrants. and that we should welcome, poor people and so forth. But once you begin to crack through that, there's deep polarization on issues in this country. Now, leaders cannot, politicians are elected reflecting that. Sometimes they gin up the emotions. And once they're in power, they can play roles of leaders in beginning to create programs that bring some kind of reconciliation or policies that can reconcile. But it's only when the people themselves want some kind of reconciliation that you're going to get it. And I mean, to deny that we're not polarized right now and to blame it on, certain individuals, I just don't think makes any common sense. It's not how politics works. It's not how history has worked. Aside from challenging his data, by the way.
Yeah, and Abramowitz is another professor who directly challenges Fiorina and has data to back it up.
Yeah, very good. You know your material on this.
I'm trying.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah.
But two things I noticed was, so I had trouble because Abramowitz is saying one thing and Fiorina is saying one thing, and I'm struggling to figure it out. But I noticed that I was watching a video of Fiorina from 2008.
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying the people aren't polarized, and the media and the public needs to calm down when they say that.
Yeah, right.
It's gotten so much worse since 2008. I'm like, bro, you're saying it's not here. There's no polarization. I mean, my God, that was before the Tea Party.
Like a golden age.
Yeah, that's before the Tea Party.
We're all together. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you're going, I have this data that shows X. Okay, but the problem keeps getting worse. And you've been saying, my data still shows we all live together. Right. But the problem is getting worse every single year. You've been saying this since 2008. It's only gotten worse.
Right.
Only gotten worse. I mean, there's no way you could have predicted the Tea Party, somebody yelling at the President Obama, you lied during the presidential speech, January 6th, denying the election, et cetera. So I'm like, your data is good, but the conclusion is just not accurate when we look at life.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say there. The problem, I'm an academic. I've been in academia for a long time. For whatever reason, I try to keep commonsensical. And one of the problems with academics, and you interview a lot of these academics, and thank you for interviewing me. But it's hyper specialized, and it's very narrowly focused. One can't have, I don't want to get too esoteric here, but a very famous novel, The Glass-Bead Game, written by a German novelist, Hermann Hesse, talks about these people who learned how to play the game, this kind of a glass-bead game, which was meaningless. And a lot of academics are so highly specialized. They're many of them are very intellectually clever, but they don't have a very broad perspective. And they live in, I hate to say it, pretty insular worlds.
California, we are a nation unto ourselves up here already.
Yeah.
And I could totally see that. And he's in the most liberal part of California. So if you consider California liberal, everybody in Cali knows the Bay Area is the most hardcore liberal.
Right.
And
it's very pristine. And I'm not looking. So it's not that I'm from Arizona, he's from Palo Alto, so I have a better point of view. But I think the larger point is that a lot of political scientists, sociologists, social scientists are so highly specialized, so data driven. And so a lot of the question with data is really, and they know this, is the kind of questions that you really ask and what other kind of data you put on. So he's been challenged. But I think commonsensically, we all know that we're in kind of this populist, insurgent, polarized period, and it's gotten worse. And I predict it's going to continue to worsen. We're going to see probably in this kind of unsettled times more violence in various ways. And one of the things that also occurs in periods of social and cultural instability, it kind of triggers nuts to go off and act. So I think we're going to see, crazies out there. They're pretty unsettled to begin with. They're nuts, and they'll undertake more violent action. So I think we're going to see, a really turbulent period right now, and that doesn't mean that things won't be resolved. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean assured that we're going to come out of it either. But we're in a period that we should be prepared for as individuals, spiritually and in terms of our mental health, and we should be prepared for a nation that we're going to go through a very intense period of disequilibrium and with pretty frightening things happening.
And we don't know how long it's going to last.
And we do not know how long it's going to last, and we do not know if it's going to resolve itself. We can only hope. And
there's that word.
And you're doing your bit with interviewing people. I mean, I want to say you've complimented me. You're the first. I do many interviews. You're the first person who seems to be asking really the right questions. So thank you very much.
Oh my God, thank you so much. I'm going to tell my mom. She's going to freak out. I'm the first person. I noticed that I'm asking questions that not everyone's asking, and I wasn't sure if I'm just not fully understanding. That's why I'm reserved. But being able to interview people allows me to test those things out. And that Abramowitz-Fiorina debate was a real doozy for me. And then it just helped when I saw some 2008 interview of Fiorina going, the media and the public should be careful saying that we're polarized, we're not, and that kind of language is dangerous. And I go, okay, but it's gotten worse. And maybe you telling everybody, calm down, it's not that bad, didn't help us prevent it. Yeah, right? Well, if you have cancer and I'm like, calm down, cancer's not that bad, and then it blows up to a tumor, me telling you to calm down was not helpful for your health at all.
Right. Yeah.
It was the opposite of helpful. I should have said, now's the time to get upset. I mean, maybe if we had been jumping up and down in 2008, like we were after January 6th, there never would have been a January 6th.
Yeah.
I see him and other people saying for years, it's cool, calm down, it's not that bad, we'll get over it.
And it doesn't mean that we need to be hysterical about it either.
Sure.
If you have a problem with cancer, you're going to be emotionally upset. And to just be told you need to calm down is not, that's kind of absurd, but you're going to be emotionally upset, but you need to realize that you have a problem, that you have a tumor that's growing, and then you need to take steps by asking the right doctors, leaders to come forward, experts to come forward and address the issue, knowing that it may be you have hopes that it's going to be the cancer will be eradicated, but you also know that it could be terminal. So that's where we are right now. So I want to thank you very much for this interview.
I can't just say, I don't want to talk about cancer because it's really negative. And maybe if we don't talk about it and we have a positive attitude, it'll go away.
Right.
Or chemotherapy, that might be the only way to cure it, but that's tough and difficult, and nobody wants to hear that. So let's not talk about it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So anyway.
Thank
you very much.
Can I ask you one last question?
One last one.
One last one.
Appointment coming up here.
Okay. Fiorina was in a conference with Liliana Mason about 1 or 2 years ago, and they showed him a survey showing Americans will not date each other anymore. In 2012, it was about 30%. Now it's over half of Americans will not date someone out of their political.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. Fiorina dismissed it and said, I don't really believe that survey. I think people are just messing with you.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
Thank you. That's all I wanted.
I'm sorry.
I send you a copy of this very soon.
We know going into the social habits of our young and right now is kind of an interview that we should have at another point. By the way, that would be.
I'll have you back. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Well, I enjoy it very much. Hey, you take care. Keep up the good work.
Thank you for coming out. I'll email you a copy soon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.